Welcome to the Determined CEO podcast, where we will dive into the latest trends and resources to support your journey in becoming a sustainable and scalable startup venture. And now, here's your host, co-working space owner and business coach, Tim Williams.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Determined CEO podcast. You're rocking with your boy, Tim Williams. Look, you all, I'm excited to be here with you all and be able to give you all an in-depth look at my personal / professional business retreat. This business retreat so far has been very rewarding, and I can't wait to continue to give you all more updates in regards to what's happening. If you all remember last episode, we were talking a little bit about the retreat, and I made mention on my story about securing or how I was going to secure the Commerce Bank building that we're looking to secure back in St. Louis for the actual community launchpad. And there were some things mentally that kind of went into my head maybe about a month ago. And maybe it was a little bit further than a month ago, but I think it really kind of it started to increase about a month ago, right? And I'm going to get a little bit into it, but I want to kind of start it off by telling you how I remembered the promise. And it had to do everything with a podcast I just listened to yesterday. I had the opportunity to be able to listen to a podcast by Joel Osteen. If you all are not familiar with Joel Osteen, then go and look him up. Really great pastor. And he has some really great material out on his podcast. He always starts his podcast off with a joke, and some of them can be a bit corny, but for the most part, they're pretty cool, right? But with that being said, this particular podcast was titled Travel Steadily. And the reason why I enjoyed this podcast thoroughly was due to the fact of the message of remembering the promise that God gave you. And in this topic, he talked a lot about not only remembering the promise that God had given you, but asking a very important question: have you been consistent? And have you been patient? So, business owners, you're probably wondering like, well, how does this apply to business? I'm about to show you how I'm going to bring my religion, Christianity, into my business. So, you all, if you listen to the last podcast, and I'm pretty sure I've said it once before in previous episodes as well, God gave me a promise that I would secure the Commerce Bank building back in St. Louis, Missouri. And to secure that promise, all he asked me to do was to go to the bank, walk around it 3 times while praying. And if you all remember in the previous episode, I made it very clear that after I finished praying for the building, got back into my car, and immediately I heard God speak to me. And he told me simply that the reason why he asked me to do that was because he wanted me to be very clear that it was nothing that I did, but all of him that will get the glory when we secured that building. He had confirmed that that building was mine. And through that confirmation, I was on cloud 9. I was high, you all. I mean, I was super happy, right? And so I go doing the daily hustle and bustle of my business, making sure things are done right over here, answering to clients over there, yada, 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 right? Well, time goes by. I'm doing these things to make sure that the community launchpad was in order. I had even joined a co-working space startup school with Jamie Russo, you all. I'll drop the notes and link about her in the show notes. But I did all of these things, right? And this was all pre-COVID. So the pandemic had not hit yet. And so with all of that, I'm tackling A, B, C, and D. And I'm wondering to myself, like, okay, I'm getting this done. I'm getting that done. When am I going to get this building? God promised me this building. When am I going to get the building? When am I going to get the building? When am I going to get the building, right? I keep asking myself that same question. And over time, just like anybody else, I'm not going to say anybody because not everybody goes through this potentially. I don't know. But I would like to think that most people do, if not majority of the world goes through this, is where you're working so hard to accomplish something, to secure something, yet you don't see any of that hard work, that effort, that tenacity, the persistence. You don't see any of it bearing fruit in a way that you feel like it should bear fruit. And I came to that point where I'm wondering, like, man, God, I'm doing all of this. I'm trying to do that. But why isn't anything happening? Y'all, here's another story within this whole co-working space or the community launchpad, right? So God promised me the building. Great. The project itself, you all, I'm being very transparent with you all. I don't mind. It's going to be a total of a $1.8 million project to get the building fully built out. And this is just based off the way that we're building it out, you all. These numbers could definitely range totally different from low to high, depending on depending on what they would like to do. But for us, we're looking at a $1.8 million project. And that's just simply to get the building built out. That's not startup capital for operational costs, employees, things of that nature. We got whole different numbers. I'm not going to go in depth into that right now. But this is a major project. And here's the thing. We had people already asking us, hey, Tim, when is the space opening? I would love to get some space there. I would love to get some space there. I would love to get some space there. I mean, we just kept hearing this. And while we were happy with the excitement and the commitments gained from all of these individuals, the one thing that was holding us back was we had yet to secure the building. And so what happens when things begin to, delay, right? People begin to go and look at other options, or they're like, okay, well, just let us know when you're going to do it. And there's a potential chance that they're wondering, like, man, is he all talk? And, as a human, we typically are our own worst critics, right? If you just think about it, who's your own worst critic when things happen? It's not going to be your mom. It's not going to be your dad. It's not going to be your sister, your brother, your friends, or some random person who doesn't even know you. You are always going to be your own worst critic. And here's the thing, you all. I am a perfectionist when it comes to my work. I really want to make sure that it's the best that I can deliver. And with that being said, when I didn't see any fruit being bared based off the work that I was doing, I began to question myself. Was I being effective? Was I being impactful? Was I doing this? Was I doing that? And all of these things began to overwhelm me. And shortly, I began to realize I was operating out of my feelings or my emotions. And that was one of the things that Joel Osteen had mentioned in the podcast, right? He was like, when we as in humans operate in our feelings and our emotions, one moment we can be high and the next moment we can be down. And here's the thing. Typically, when we're on our down moments, for some odd reason, we find a way to stay in our down moments a lot longer than we do in our high moments. Why? Because we're being too self-critical on ourselves. We're asking ourselves A question, B question, C question, D question. And all of these questions aren't coming back answered in a positive light, but they're being answered in more negative lights. And so what happens? We're beginning to weigh ourselves down. We begin to put more baggage than there should be on our shoulders. And what I want what I want to do here, I just want to stop right here and encourage you. You have to keep pushing. No matter when things get tough, no matter when you don't see things happening the way you feel like they should be happening, you have to keep pushing. And this is where Joel Osteen's podcast sermon goes into play. He asks a very important question. When you remember the promise that God gave you, ask yourself, 1, are you being patient? And 2, are you being consistent? Business owners, we are talking about remembering the promise. But within remembering the promise, the keys to obtaining the promise is patience and consistency. Patience in the form of, you know the promise. God told you it very clearly. But the question I have for you is, are you patient enough to understand that just because God promised you something doesn't mean that promise was going to be answered today or tomorrow? Tomorrow might be 2 years from now. Tomorrow might be 6 months from now. Tomorrow might be even 10 years from now. But the question is, are you going to be patient? And you all, when I'm talking to you all, I'm talking to myself. Don't think this is me making it seem like I've tackled this and I'm better than anybody in this area. Hell no, I'm not. There are things that I struggle with. Patience, I have seen that I am patient in areas, but also throughout this journey called entrepreneurship, I've also seen many areas where I have been impatient in. And I have to too check myself. I have to check myself. Why? Because I realize I'm not being patient. In certain cases, yes, I was patient. And in certain cases, I am patient still. But there are in many cases that I've shown impatience. Then, again, am I being consistent? I'm asking myself this question, but remember, you're listening to this podcast. So, are you being consistent? And not consistent every other day, every other week, every other 2 weeks, but are you being consistent every single day? Are you being consistent with your clients? Are you being consistent with organization? Have you properly prepared yourself and your brand, your company, your organization for the growth that was promised to you? Look, I was promised a building, you all. And not just some small rundown building. A bank that totals at a total of 13,000 square footage. The actual operating space of that bank is a total of 11,200 square foot. And with that, you all, that is a major size for a startup to commandeer. And what I'm here trying to tell you is you have to be prepared for the growth that's coming your way. So God promised you something, but that does not mean that you're necessarily prepared for it right now. You all, I'm using a Bible story for this only because it was a Bible story that I just read about. I did know about this Bible story, but it goes into the book that I made mention in the last episode called Facing Goliath. In Facing Goliath, the main story that they talk about is David and Goliath, right? Look, David and Goliath, most people know the story. I hope you know the story. If you don't, I'm going to give you a very quick rundown. David, a shepherd, found himself in front of a huge human being. It goes to say in the Bible that Goliath was almost 10 feet tall, and his armor weighed a total of 126 pounds, you all. That's bigger than most people in the world. Just imagine having, and not most people in the world, but most people. And so, just imagine having 126 pounds of armor on you at the same height that you're at. Goliath was a huge man, a very strong man. And with that being said, David, all he did was bring a slingshot and pebbles or stones to a fight with a giant who had a spear. And what happens in this particular story is, for those who, I hope most people know this, but David does defeat Goliath, hits him on the forehead with one of the stones, and it seeps into his forehead. Goliath falls down, right? All the men, king's men, were impressed. They rejoiced. God, at that time as well, promised David that he would be the king. Now, at that particular time, the current king was Saul. You all, please go read the story. I'm not here to do Bible study right now, but I'm gonna give you like real high level overviews. But at the time, the king was Saul, and King Saul was not in the business of relinquishing his power at that particular time. But here's the thing: David understood. David didn't go to King Saul and make him denounce his leadership as king because he defeated Goliath. David went back and continued to do what David was known for. Not being one who removes kings out of power or one who defeats giants, but being a shepherd. And in this time, David spent that time in preparation. Also in this time, King Saul was after David, trying to kill David because he felt threatened. He was jealous, whatever you want to call. But at the end of the day, David stayed focused on not trying to become king, but doing what he needed to do to be prepared to become a king. And so, why do I bring up this story? Because I want you to understand that when you've been given a promise, you all, that does not mean that promise is going to come right then and there. No. But what it does mean is you have been granted an opportunity to secure something or someone, whatever that promise might be, that no one else can secure. But there is work to be done on your end. And that work does not mean that you are physically, actively operating within the promise at that specific time. There is a preparation season for everyone. And that is something that I forgot, you all. While I was preparing, I forgot. And so when I forgot, and I began to ask myself, why have I not secured that building yet? I began to self-defeat myself because I then start to throw out the promise and not remember that, hey, maybe I'm not fully prepared for this. And here's the thing, you all. When that promise happened, this is pre-COVID. The pandemic hadn't hit yet. Because of the pandemic, not only was I grateful that I did not secure that building, because I do still to this day believe if I would have secured that building before the pandemic and the pandemic hit, it would have potentially wiped me out as a business owner. So not only am I grateful for not securing that building during the pandemic, because of the pandemic, while it set my company back in ways that I was not truly looking forward to and put me in an uncomfortable position, guess what it did? It gave me time to prepare. It gave me time to strategize. I began to understand who my client was better because of that time. You all, my company took a pivot because of COVID. Actually, sorry, not because of COVID, but COVID allowed me to better understand the position that my company actually had. And in that position, in that understanding of position, I made a whole pivot in what we were doing. When I originally started Diverse Culture, it was simply to be a co-working space that would invite diverse and inclusive professionals into the community. Right? Now, all of a sudden, I no longer even title ourselves as a co-working space. We are a community launchpad that is focused on economic development and social enterprise to build stronger social foundations around diversity and inclusion, and to be able to drive those diverse resources, opportunities, and connections to be able to build a sustainable and then scalable ecosystem for otherwise an underserved community. And so you all, because of time, because of patience, because of me being consistent, I was able to get to this point. But it did not start that way, you all. I just told you, I forgot. I got impatient. But I then remembered. And guess what? This sermon by Joel Osteen was just even more validation for me to say, Tim, this has to be done. Tim, this needs to be done. Tim, you have to go on this business retreat because you need to strategize. You need to realign yourself spiritually. These are things that potentially I would not have been able to do at this particular moment should we have acquired that building now, or should the pandemic not have happened. So, you all, I need you to understand. Remember the promise that God gave you. Remember your vision. Remember why you set out to be a business owner. Remember why you started that company. And while remembering those things, be patient. Be consistent. Be consistent. Be excellent in all that you do. Be excellent towards customer service. Be excellent in delivering a product or service to your customers. Be excellent in the development of that product or service that you are doing for your customer. Be excellent in all that you do. What happens when you're patient, when you're consistent, and when you're excellent in all that you do? When you do finally secure and see that promise come to fruition, it'll be that much more valuable to you. Here's the thing, you all. My motto: become the change that you want to see. If you're ready to become the change that you want to see, you have to be willing to do things that you're not necessarily comfortable with doing. No one's comfortable with having to always wait, especially when they have all these grand ideas. But here's the thing, you all. Are you wanting to reap your rewards now? Or do you want to see delayed gratification? For those who don't know what delayed gratification is, it's basically you don't see the gratification now, but due to all the hard work, the effort, the persistence, the consistency, the patience that you put in, you see that gratification come later down the road. And here's the thing. Typically, I can't say all the time because I'm not all knowing, right? But typically, when you are waiting for delayed gratification and you're focused on doing the work needed to drive impact, the gratification that will come later will typically be greater than the gratification that will come now. So, here's what I urge you all. This is a challenge for you all. And it's a challenge for me as well. Remember the promise first. Be patient, be consistent, and be excellent in all that you do. Become the change that you want to see. I'm going to end this podcast both with a call to action, but first, I want to end it with a scripture. This scripture is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, you all. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lead not to your own understanding, yet in all things acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. Why am I telling you this? It's because God is giving you a promise. We all have a purpose. We all have a platform, you all. And the moment you begin to understand that purpose, you begin to understand that platform, and you begin to lean on God, guess what? He will give you the desires of your heart. This is not an episode or a podcast about, biblical studies and Bible study and all that stuff, you all, but you're getting an in-depth look of me as the determined CEO. This is my nature. I'm going to stay true to my nature. You all, what I want you to do, I'm going to put that podcast in the show notes, right? It's called Travel Steadily by Joel Osteen. And I also want you all to purchase the book, Facing Goliath, by J.P. Jones. Again, Facing Goliath is a book for men. So women, what I'm going to do for you is I am going to do the research on my own and figure out what book would pertain to you all that closely resembles Facing Goliath. But what I want you all to do is purchase that book. Read the book. I promise you all will not regret reading these books or listening to these podcasts. I'm here to provide you value. That value is going to come from a personal and professional level, you all. And with that being said, you all, another value that I want to drive is I'm a business coach. I thrive on helping startup and small businesses build profitable and sustainable, scalable companies. And I want to do the same for you. So this is what I want to do. I urge you right now, go to my website, www.thedeterminedceo.com. Go ahead and contact me, whether it be for web design services, branding services, or consultancy services. I want to do you a favor. I'm going to give you 15% off of my services. All you need to do is tell me a little bit about what it is that you're trying to do. And then within the description, go ahead and put the discount code 15% off podcast. That's all you got to do. And here's the thing. One of the things I'm going to throw into this service is for you to be featured onto my podcast. I want people to know about you. I want them to know exactly what it is that you're doing. You want them to know about you. You want them to know exactly what it is that you're doing. So go ahead, put that code in when you inquire about my services. Again, that's 15% off podcast. It's not cap sensitive or anything like that, you all. Just 15% off podcast. All right. Anyway, thank you for checking in with me. This is the Determined CEO podcast, and you're rocking with your boy, Tim Williams. I will catch you all later, and remember to become the change that you want to see. Peace.
Thanks for listening. I hope you were able to take some valuable gems from today's episode. Be sure to follow us on social media at The Determined CEO and online at thedeterminedceo.com. Check back weekly and be sure to subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, go and become the change you want to see.